I didn't say that. Well, overall, I think it was a useful meeting, a good initiative of the French delegation of France to have this meeting dedicated to the humanitarian situation in and around Syria. And I think it was a very good idea to invite the foreign ministers, representatives of neighboring countries, to share their grievances with the Security Council and to evaluate various aspects of the humanitarian situation. And it was a very good opportunity for us to remind our colleagues in the Security Council of a number of factors of the humanitarian situation and also of the overall situation in and around Syria. We did remind members of the Security Council that, of course, the refugee camps around Syria are very important, and they need to have a proper financial assistance from the international community, but also we should not forget and give proper humanitarian assistance to the numerous internally displaced persons and numerous people in need of such assistance within Syria. We reminded colleagues in the Security Council that humanitarian assistance needs to be impartial and neutral, that it should be based on international law. We did draw attention to the fact that unilateral sanctions which have been imposed by a number of countries and regional organizations have impacted negatively the humanitarian situation in Syria, and therefore called upon those countries who introduced those sanctions in circumvention of the Security Council to lift them immediately. And of course we took this opportunity to point out that there cannot be radical improvement of the humanitarian situation in Syria unless the fighting stops. And therefore we need to do what we are supposed to do according to the consensus basis of the work of the international community on the crisis in Syria. Well, you know, you hear a lot that there is no unity in the international community, there is no unity in the Security Council, but in fact there is a consensus basis. Those are resolutions 2042, 2043, and I think most importantly, the communique of the ministerial meeting of the Action Group in Geneva on June 30. So according to that, we all members of the international community, should be working with the parties in Syria in order to put and train dialogue and form what is called in the communique of the Geneva meeting the transitional body, which is to be composed of representatives of the government, of various opposition groups, by their agreement. So this is a clear goal of the international community, and we should not, any of us, be distracted by anything else from trying to pursue this goal. And of course, Russia has been working very actively both with the government and various opposition groups in order to help that happen. And in my statement, I hope you followed, I did call on all other responsible members of the international community to follow our example. I think that had it been the case, then we would have been on a much more solid ground and would have advanced much more than so far has unfortunately been the case because of the lack of uniform adherence by the most important members of the international community to the implementation of the Geneva document and the other elements of the consensus basis for the international community. So overall it was a good meeting. Please.
Do you think, I mean, given the meeting, given this humanitarian situation over there in Syria, which you know is dire, no matter what, is there any way that these permanent members of the Security Council who have such serious differences, that they can overcome them and find a way forward, as you are suggesting in your yourself? And do you think there is a way? Have you thought of a mechanism which would drive it forward?
Mechanism. I mean, if somebody thinks of something, of course we would be prepared to look at that. But I think what needs to be done is simply to look once again at the Geneva document and do what is supposed to be done under the Geneva document. I can tell you, like almost day by day, what we have been doing, what Sergei Lavrov, the foreign minister of Russia, has been doing day by day in our contacts with the Syrian government, with the various opposition groups, in order to help what is agreed upon in the Geneva document happen. Can others report the same things? Can others tell us what they have done in order to impress it on the opposition groups that they must enter into dialogue with the Syrian government? And I saw a couple of days ago, I think there was one opposition group which called on all the parties in Syria to stop fighting and to enter into dialogue, and that would allow humanitarian assistance, only to be immediately criticized by our other opposition group. And this is a serious problem, and of course our influence on the opposition groups, like our influence on the government, are not apparently sufficient in order to have this political process start.
France has said that it's prepared to recognize the opposition as the government. They've urged them to somehow unite, and they say that this is their next step. What does Russia think?
Well, you know, I think, of course, people look for various ideas, but I think we need to apply one criteria: how those ideas are correlated with this consensus basis which is reflected in the Geneva Communique. The Geneva Communique does speak about this transitional body composed by the representatives of the government and various opposition groups. I'm not sure this idea of a government which will be recognized even before, I mean, promised to recognize even before we know what kind of a government this is, that is entirely in line with the ideas reflected in the Geneva document. But I don't want to start polemics over it. This is simply a question mark which I have in my mind as I hear various ideas expressed.
Ambassador, thank you. Some members in the Security Council and outside the Security Council, they're saying that there is now an overriding humanitarian crisis that would allow those countries in the West mainly to bypass the Security Council, as what happened in Kosovo.
No,
they're doing this kind of projection.
I haven't heard anybody say that in the Council. In fact, I did follow the press conference which was given earlier today by the foreign ministers of France and UK, and they did state very clearly that their intention was to work within the framework of international law. This at least was my reading of their remarks, and I was very encouraged to hear that.
Mr. Ambassador, the Turkish foreign minister has proposed setting up a safe zone to protect civilians inside Syria. What is Russia's response to this proposal?
Well, I agree with what the High Commissioner for Refugees, Mr. Guterres, said about the idea of safe zones. You look up his statement, he made it very clear that he thought that history showed that they cannot be relied on as an effective tool for protecting civilians, that we must work together in order to help alleviate, improve humanitarian situation for the entire population of Syria. Please, sir.
Today, Foreign Minister France and UK, they said we will continue to help opposition group in Syria. Do you think this position help to ending the war?
Well, again, those are ministers of very important colleagues of ours in the Security Council. I don't want to sort of start polemics with them, but I thought that, in fact, the U.S. permanent representative made a good point, Ambassador Rice, when she said that the international assistance, humanitarian assistance, should be coordinated with UN agencies. So to me, again, I think this is a very valid point. How this idea, which may have been expressed by two foreign ministers, which you referred to, if we understood them correctly, how that idea of helping individual groups and individual localities is in line with this general principle of impartiality and neutrality, and with the call of the United States to coordinate humanitarian assistance with the UN agencies. And this is one of the things why I think that this meeting has been helpful, because we have been able to look at a variety of ideas. Some of them may be emotional, some of them may be sort of politically motivated in terms of domestic policies, and I think also listening to Mr. Guterres, to foreign ministers of neighboring countries, and we're in a better position to see what actually and really and practically can be done in order to help the Syrian population.
With all the heads of state and government coming for the GA, will that provide a venue to perhaps get some progress on Syria?
I'm sure there is going to be a meeting on Syria, including a meeting in the Security Council. I'm sure of that. Please.
Ambassador,
Yes, Ambassador, the Foreign Minister of France today used rather strong language with your ally, President Bashar al-Assad in Syria, calling him a criminal, referring to him as Assad and his clan. They are calling, both the British and the French ministers were calling for accountability in the ICC, that it's time to take this issue seriously, those who must understand that there is accountability.
I don't want to get between France and Damascus, Please.
In your speech, you mentioned about countries that are imposing sanctions on Syria to lift them up. And I was wondering, less than 10 days, Secretary Clinton and your foreign minister will get together, and probably Syria will be on their agenda. Is this a precondition of Russia to further cooperate on solving the Syrian crisis?
No, this is not a precondition. It's just a concern and our position of principle, which we have repeatedly expressed at various fora, including the Security Council. Please.
Recently, the Syrian opposition leaders openly start saying that they have to find out a solution without UN, outside UN, immediate solution. What would you like to say about it?
Some said that after certain failures of some draft resolutions, they were going to work outside of the Security Council. But in fact, and this is one of the fundamental problems, the so-called work outside of the Security Council had been continuing from the outset of the crisis. That's, unfortunately, we see two tracks. One is the track where the international community is trying to rally around political solution, various formulas, Kofi Annan, now Mr. Brahimi. And the other is the track which is forgetting about the Security Council, its resolutions, and frankly, it's the track towards toppling the government in Syria, which in my view, is not really in line with the ideas of the Geneva Communique and does not help establish political dialogue, which in our view is necessary in order to have a speedy conclusion, if speedy is the right word, after 18 months of bloodshed for the Syrian crisis. Please.
In case they
I'm sorry?
Mr. Annan called for consequences to be imposed on the government and the opposition in case they didn't carry out the plan. What will happen? And nothing was done. What will happen if Mr. Brahimi does the same thing?
Well, first of all, I don't want to predetermine what Mr. Brahimi is going to do. We had, as you know, a very good informal meeting, members of the Security Council, with Mr. Brahimi yesterday. I mean, one of the problems we have had in the past, when the people said that in the Security Council, and in fact, they were very ready to propose things which could be done against the government, but nobody could suggest anything which could be realistically done against the opposition. You can impose sanctions on the government. What can you do with members of the opposition who live in Paris? In Darfur situation, we had an opposition leader living in Paris for years, refusing to negotiate, and nothing could be done. Nothing could be done about. So there is this imbalance which is there, and what we need to do is to work, and Russia does not need a Security Council resolution to tell it to do that, because we know that this is a Geneva document, that this is a position of the international community, and this is the right thing to do. And that's why we have been doing that, working with the government and the opposition group, telling them, let's find a formula for dialogue.
Because you said you've been working with both, but you said you have not succeeded necessarily with either. What exactly did you ask the Syrian government to do that they refused to do?
Well, on both sides, the Syrian government, at least, they've been telling us that they are prepared for dialogue, but they need to deal with those who fight and who do not respond to. They tried to respond by implementing at the first stage Mr. Annan's plan, but then people were coming over and taking over militarily those localities from which they were pulling their heavy weapons. And they say it with varying degrees of clarity, but generally they accept that there does need to be dialogue, and generally they are prepared for dialogue. This so far has not been the case from the opposition. Two more questions. You had your two questions. You had your two questions. I responded to the best of my ability. If this is not satisfactory, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Please go ahead.
Ambassador, many of the refugees, the fleeing of the refugees has been caused by bombing from the air. Has Russia been dealing with this at all with the Syrian government?
Well, exactly. You know, we believe that the Annan Plan should be observed in its entirety, and one of the elements of the Annan Plan is that heavy weapons should not be used. But the situation is such that, you know, this is an all-out fight. You know, if opposition groups are attacking Damascus, attacking Aleppo, we do believe in Kofi Annan's plan, but it does not envisage the opposition groups to pursue this kind of activity without sort of condoning any kind of activity. It's a tragic situation, so violence must be stopped on all sides. The last question.
Yes, sir. In that context, I just want to know, do you think that Kofi Annan's plan, under which there were the observers there, which were suddenly withdrawn, do you think that should be revisited and that observers are...
We think it is a mistake. We think it is a mistake. We think that this is something which was done for unclear motives, because in our view they did play a certain restraining role, and they provided an established presence in Syria. But since it was not possible to extend this mandate, we accepted the creation of an office, and we hope that the office is going to be able to take up, among other things, some of the monitoring responsibilities which the mission has been carrying out. Thank you.